Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're very well. My name's Andy, Head Vitality Coach. It's my pleasure to be here with you this afternoon, and I'm also joined by Vitality Coach Melissa. Good afternoon, Melissa. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Doing great, thanks. Doing great. It's been another action-packed day, and as we focus on mental health awareness this week. Today, myself and Melissa this afternoon are going to go through some of the questions that have been raised with us over the course of today. This morning, we had Henry and Jamie presenting our Understanding Stress and Anxiety workshop. So we only had so much time and there were so many questions, comments that we would just wanted to dedicate this additional 30 minutes to take the time to go through and answer those questions for you. So without much further ado, Melissa, we've got a lot to cover. Shall we get stuck in?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Perfect. Melissa, what we'll do is just in terms of, just to kick us off, I have a question here is, how do you cope with the domino effect of feeling anxious? And then because you feel anxious, you get stressed?
Well, what I'd suggest doing is identify what your triggers are. What is it that's making you feel anxious? Sometimes we can become anxious in times when we're not quite sure why. So it's really important to understand what those triggers are. And in order to really understand those triggers, understand the feelings that you experience when you're anxious, because anxiety can present itself in so many different ways. It can be a feeling of worry. It could be physical symptoms. It could be other emotions such as anger or sadness. So really try and identify when you're feeling anxious and what is triggering them. And once you are able to understand those triggers, put boundaries in there to protect yourself and your mental well-being. And sometimes those boundaries can make us feel a little bit uncomfortable, but as we get used to them, it becomes easier. So, for example, if one of your triggers around triggers of anxiety is work, a boundary that you can put in place is to not respond to work calls after a certain time of day, a realistic, sensible time of day, to really give yourself time to unwind and switch off from there. Another thing is anxiety and anxious thoughts. They're often liars. So try firstly externalize that emotion. Anxiety doesn't define you, and remember that many of our anxious thoughts are as a result of catastrophizing and thinking of the worst possible case scenario, and often they are not true. So when you have those anxious thoughts, ask yourself for the evidence to prove that it is true or that it isn't true. And what I like to do is almost envision that I am in a courtroom and I have to prove that these thoughts are true beyond reasonable doubt. And if I can't, then let's argue with the evidence to show that this isn't actually going to happen. Distraction techniques are fantastic to help you with anxiety as well. These can be, flow-inducing activities. So when you get into that state of where you almost lose all sense of time, and you end up enjoying yourself, and as a result, that anxiety subsides. Or you can do more obvious ones. So, for example, you can do things such as counting backwards from a really high number. This is really good when you're experiencing very intense anxiety and almost like a panic attack. Or another thing you can do is the elastic band technique as well, which is where you envision the word stop in your head every time an anxious thought comes into your mind. Or you can even say the word, and some people like to put like a hairband, I've got one here, or an elastic band on their wrist and just flick it every time that anxious thought comes in. And that's almost like a grounding technique to bring you back to the present and stop thinking about that. Another thing you can do for a grounding technique, not very comfortable, but is to put your arm into some cold water, your hand into some cold water, and that brings you back to the present moment rather than thinking about those anxious thoughts. Remember, no emotion has ever lasted forever. Those anxious thoughts will pass. And if you really would like to work on your anxiety, another fantastic way is to challenge that anxiety. So to prove it wrong. So for example, doing small things that challenge it just a little bit every day to help you overcome those anxious thoughts. Because unless you prove anxiety wrong, it can spiral.
We've all been there in
Oh
that. I
yeah,
think the
definitely.
what really resonated with me, what we said there, is like catastrophizing. You're in that storm in your head, and it's
Mm,
just going round and round and round. But it sounds like what I'm picking up: setting boundaries with certain
mhm.
things,
Yep.
distraction, challenging, asking for the actual, where's the evidence, where's the truth in this.
Mhm.
These are ways, and many of the different ways, to sort of just stop it in its tracks and then almost flip to gain momentum in a positive direction, and
Mhm.
almost get ourselves out of that spin.
Yeah, and also lastly, if you have someone that you trust, and that you can talk to, open up to them, because often when we are in that thought storm catastrophizing, it can be hard to pull ourselves out. And we tend to be our own worst critics. So if you talk to somebody else, they're often thinking more calmly, more logically, and most importantly, more kindly, in a more kind way. And they'll probably be able to think of solutions to any problems you may be having, but also just make you feel better in general.
Mm. That in itself, just vocalizing, is a great exercise in terms of literally getting things off your chest, and gets
Yeah,
you out of that very sometimes negatively reflective bubble, and
yeah.
helps you then to progress forward. That's fantastic. Thanks, Melissa. So I think we'll go on to, this is sort of another question that we received over the course of today is, how can you best discipline yourself to assist with mental health and well-being, and more importantly, stick to it?
Mm.
I think it's quite an interesting question.
Well, like with anything, the more you do it, the more it becomes a habit. And I think it's very similar with sort of going to the gym. You know, how can I stick to this? And don't they say if you've been to the gym so many times, it becomes a habit or something? Um, so that's one thing I suggest. But another thing I would suggest is doing things to ensure that the activities that you're doing are enjoyable and they're not chore like. Mix them up. You don't necessarily have to do something every day. But then you find that the things that you do to protect your mental well-being just becomes a habit. So I've got my own personal example. I had to do a gratitude intervention for my master's, and that was 10 years ago now. And I did it for about 3 weeks, did it every other day. It wasn't chore like. And then all of a sudden, I noticed that it just became part of my personality. I just use gratitude constantly, for little things in life, like minor inconveniences that would usually really wind me up, and big things as well. Um, so that's the thing that I would suggest doing. Try to stick with it, and the ways that you can stick with it is to find creative ways to introduce different things to help you to look after your mental well-being. And often things that you're doing to look after your mental well-being are things that you enjoy, because if you're not enjoying it, then that's not really a good state of mental health, is it?
Correct, Melissa. I know the thing that I found interesting, and why we wanted to sort of share this question, was around discipline. Discipline makes it sound as if it should be hard work, or it should be
Yeah.
something that you need to block out time for and diarize, and needs commitment and passion. But what certainly I'm learning, again, my background's in physiotherapy. I'm by no means a mental well-being expert such as yourself and Henry. However, it's the things that naturally come to you, the things that you find naturally enjoy,
Mm,
are beneficial for your mental health and well-being, but also general health and well-being, general
yeah.
relationships, and it has a positive impact on every other aspect of your life.
Yeah, I understand though it can be very hard to fit things in, even those enjoyable things, in such a
Mm,
busy world that we live in. But even if you just take, half an hour before bed, even 20 minutes to do something to help you, like reading a book, can really help to calm your mind, and help you to drift off into that nice natural sleep, rather than looking, and scrolling through your phone and looking at all the upsetting things going on in the world. Do something like reading, because that will help you to get into a state of flow. Usually something, read something enjoyable, and that will help you to drift off into that nice sleep and hopefully get you the 7 hours that you need.
absolutely, absolutely. As relatively new parents, we both appreciate the need for sleep and its
We
positive
do.
impact on everything else.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, another key question that's come through to us today is how to support family or friends with stress, particularly those who may not want to yet seek help themselves.
So the main thing to remember is what your place is here. Okay. If somebody
Mm,
does not want to get help themselves, then there's only a certain amount that you can do. It is not your responsibility to make them feel better. It's not your responsibility to fix the situation, which many of us often want to do. That's our urge when we see someone struggling, especially someone we love. We just want to make them feel better, and you can't do that. People have to have a motivation themselves, and you will find that if someone, for example, were to be referred to mental health services, if they don't want to engage in the program and do proactive things, then they won't be worked with, if you see what I mean. And it's the same as if you went to the doctors and then you refuse to take your antibiotics or something. Well, there's not a lot the doctor can do about that. But what I would say is, when dealing with the stress of other people, is be kind regarding their stresses. Just because you may not find something stressful doesn't mean they don't. So, for example, I think there's probably a few members of our team that love the idea of doing a skydive, but for me, that terrifies me. So they would probably think my stressor is really, really silly. But for me, if we were up in that plane together, I'd be hyperventilating. So always be kind regarding their stressors. Many of us, as I said, want to make people feel better. So one thing that many of us try and do is get them to look on the bright side. And this can sometimes be a little bit insulting. And it can make them feel worse as well. So if they're not ready to do that, don't try to make them look on the bright side. The next thing I would suggest is embrace the silence as well. When people are having these difficult conversations or upsetting conversations, we often feel like silence feels awkward. But if somebody is sitting there in silence, it usually means that they're thinking about what they want to talk to you about next. And if you're busy talking over them, giving them advice that they've not asked for, they might then feel judged and pull away and not tell you something really important. So always embrace the silence and just listen in a non-judgmental way as well.
I love that. One thing that yourself and Henry did cover yesterday was around being better than a lamppost. Now
Mm-hmm.
that might sound a bit strange, Melissa. Do you want to just give us a little bit of an insight as to what we mean by that? And I think it's particularly interesting whenever you say embrace the silence, because that's
Mm-hmm.
something that we just want to jump in and fill gaps. Tell us a
So,
little bit more.
so yeah, essentially it's this theory of the lamppost effect. And when you are talking to someone, all you've got to do is be better than a lamppost. And if a person was talking to a lamppost, they wouldn't be getting anything back. But if they're talking to you and just, responding to them in ways by saying, you know what, thank you so much for telling me what's going on with you, because for them to open up to you, that is a really, really big step.
Hmm.
So to just be better than a lamppost, that's not a really hard thing to do. All you've got to do is open your mouth, really, and say something, but be kind when you're saying whatever it is that you're going to respond with.
That's
Um,
fantastic.
yeah.
And I think key message really, Melissa, is the fact that what we're saying here is know your role,
Mm,
and there are avenues for professional support that exist. And as a friend, as a colleague, as a parent, whatever it might be, your role is simply just to be a listening ear,
mm, mm.
not in a non-judgmental manner, and to sort of facilitate in a positive manner, but don't offer solutions. Don't try to make them feel better. Just listening.
Yeah. And if you are really worried about their mental well-being, ask them, do you know if there is any help out there? Do you want me to tell you what's out there? Even, if someone is worried to go and get that help, you could even say, I'll come to the GP with you. This isn't
Mm,
something that you need to feel scared of or worried about. I'm here with you to go through this.
brilliant. Thanks, Melissa. Speaking of family, speaking of helping others, what are good coping strategies for children when they feel stressed or overwhelmed?
So, what I'd suggest here is give them a space where they can express their worries. A lot of children often don't tell their parents what's going on because they're worried that they're going to get told off. So, make sure that it's a non judgmental place. Where you're not going to tell them what to do, you're not going to yell at them, you just want to know what's going on for them. Some parents do this by giving their children like a journal, like a worry journal, and they can write it when they get home from school, and then you can address it the next day or over dinner if you want to. Or, it can be something small like, the journey to and from school, where you can talk about any worries that you might have. And often a lot of children feel stressed out because they don't know all the facts of the situation. So we're really lucky being adults, because if we're worried about something, we can just Google it and know what sites are the trusted sites. All kids these days can Google and find out information, but the problem is that they don't know what sites are the trusted ones. They probably can't make sense of all the stats and things like that. So if they have worries, if you can provide them with facts around the situation, to try and, it goes back to the beliefs be the facts.
Mm,
So try to disprove their worries through facts. But also remember, when you're trying to reassure your child, don't trivialize the stressor. Um, Often, as adults, we laugh at the things that, little ones get wound up about, because sometimes it'll be my mummy wouldn't let me go and swim in 0-degree water or whatever. But when there is something that's really worrying them, remember, their brains aren't as fully developed as ours yet. So all these new emotions that they're experiencing, they can become really, really overwhelming for them and really difficult for them to manage. So don't trivialize them, reassure them and respond to them in a really nice, loving way. Um, Much like with adults, I would suggest exploring flow inducing activities for children. So those are activities where they seem to lose all sense of time. So get them out, playing with other children, engaging in craft activities, anything that keeps their hands busy, reading. Um, but if you are really worried about your child's mental well-being, then there are services to access. If your child is part of Vitality, you can access through us, or you can also speak to your GP. CAM services are fantastic as well.
amazing. I think the key thing is I suppose as adults, we've experienced more of these opportunities, haven't we? So in
Mhm.
ways we're more experienced, but actually just something that I want to pick up on, and something that I know yourself and Henry have chatted about this week, Melissa. As a parent, for example, and I was your child, what impact can I have on my child? So for example, if I what I think I liked your analogy yesterday with regards to the aeroplane and putting our own masks on before we can
Mm.
then help others. I think that applies even more so with those
Yeah,
closest to us. Is that
yeah,
right?
yeah. So really remember, your mental well-being is going to impact the mental well-being of your children. And just like if we were in an aeroplane and it was about to crash, they would say, put on your air mask before you even put on your own child's air mask, because you cannot help them unless you've got your air mask on yourself. So always ensure that your mental well-being is well looked after, so that you can look after the mental well-being of your children. And also, you are helping to shape your child's window on the world as well. So if they witness and see certain things, then that will help to shape how they cope with things in the future as well. Not to put
Amazing.
you guys under under too much pressure there.
I know I'm trying
So,
not to
but
catastrophize myself or think about all of the things that I've
yeah,
been doing.
yeah. But it is just a simple case of look after your own mental well-being, and if your child sees you doing that, then they're going to copy that as well. You know.
Exactly.
So adopt really good, healthy coping strategies, because you are the best teacher for your child.
We are an awesome responsibility.
Yes.
And again, sort of like linking on from this, Melissa, and sort of quite pertinent and quite important for us all at the moment, is a discussion around work and workplaces and where we do that. So again, we've had someone pop a question in today. Recently, I've been feeling anxious about work. How can I manage this?
Okay. Well, a lot of people who have been, particularly, I don't know what the case is here, but particularly a lot of people that have been working from home at the moment have been doing far more hours, and where we've not got that commute to and from work, the boundaries are starting to blur. So what I would suggest doing is having an appropriate time to switch off your laptop. Don't continue working purely because you're at home, because just because you're at home, it doesn't mean that you're any more relaxed, because you are still working. So switch off that laptop, switch off the work mobile as well. If you get calls through from colleagues on your personal phone, many of us have a do not disturb mode that you can assess certain numbers to. Try that. And just put boundaries in place with work so that you have the chance to switch off and recharge ready for the next working day. Another thing that you can do is try walking around the block, because that gives you a sense of a commute, to help yourself to fully switch off. And have a clear desk policy at home as well. Every night, when I finish work, I put my laptop in our lovely Vitality bags, and I put it away so that I don't blur the lines between work and home life. I do a lot of work in my living room, and when I'm, chilling out in the evening, I don't want to have constant reminders of work as well. Another thing that you could do is also, if you're feeling incredibly stressed out by work, assess what is it that's causing it, and is there anything that you can do practically to try and resolve those issues. So I would say have a chat with your manager and see if there's anything that can be done about your workload. Can any of it be delegated? Um, are you being assertive enough, and setting expectations as well? And this is again something that your manager may be able to give you some guidance on. Are you a bit of a people pleaser, and as a result your workload is spiraling because you want to try and do everything you can to help out your colleagues? And just remember what your limits are. If you can't do something, it's better that you say it there and then, rather than making promises and then working till all hours and getting burnt out as a result of it. Also, do look out for the signs of burnout as well. And if you do feel that you're starting to become burnt out, take that time off. Many of us haven't been taking any time off either because we can't go anywhere. But that doesn't mean that you don't need a break from work. Even if we can't go anywhere, just spending a few days at home, relaxing, switching off from work can do you the world of good.
Absolutely. Melissa, just you touched on it there with regards to the signs of burnout. Just give us a little bit of an insight with regards to that. What would we be experiencing ourselves, or alternatively, what might we see in others?
Yeah. So you might be experiencing feelings of being overwhelmed, feeling unable to switch off at night. Your thoughts are racing, particularly around things to do with work. And then during the day, you find that you're completely exhausted purely because really you've been awake all night worrying. You may have some difficulties concentrating. You may be missing deadlines as a result of it. And you may be becoming irritable or tearful, or feeling like you can't handle situations that you could have done in the past. And this isn't just at work as well. You may find that that feeling of overwhelmed then filters into your personal life as well. And to observe this in your colleagues, look out for changes in behavior. Are they missing deadlines? Are they becoming more irritable, upset? What sort of change? Are you noticing changes in their behavior? That is the main take home.
For sure. Okay, Melissa, so we've definitely, I think everything that you said, particularly with regards to working at home, resonates with the conversations that we've all been having over the past year with our members. we're about to enter, and are for some of us already in a period of change again, with regards to now offices are opening, businesses are welcoming employees back. So if we're already burnt out, already not taking holidays, you can see there's potentially more to come. Particularly, and kind of we wanted to focus on this question for a little while, as well as how to deal with travel anxiety, for example, to and from the office.
Mm-hmm. So what I would suggest doing, that is quite a specific problem. So what I would suggest doing is accessing the talking therapies that we've got through Vitality. CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, would be able to help you there. But just in the meantime, I would suggest challenging that anxiety bit by bit, identifying what is it that you're worried about with regards to the aspects of travel, and can you start doing little things to expose yourself to it to prove that anxiety wrong.
Amazing. The kind of another key question, and it kind of almost goes back to sort of underlying principles. How do we handle stress so it doesn't impact our actual health or cause any health issues? What should we be doing?
So stress goes on to cause health issues when we are exposed to stress for prolonged periods of time, for a consistent amount of time. So um, when we experience stress, the way the body designed it, it was to try and help us to escape life-threatening situations. And as a result of that, I think a lot of this was covered in today's workshop. But as a result of that, so many elements of the body shut down to help you to get out of that potentially life-threatening situation. So fight or flight, essentially. And if we continue entering that situation purely for psychological reasons, then our body is going to continue shutting down. So that means, things like, repairing the body, that shuts down. Your heart rate increases, that then has an impact on your cardiovascular system and things like that. So what is really important is when you identify that you are entering those high levels of stress, to work out ways to get your body to get back to those baseline levels of calm. So a really fantastic method of doing this is through mindfulness exercises. I appreciate mindfulness isn't everybody's cup of tea, but just simply sitting for a minute or two, focusing on your breathing, even just focusing on an object. So this glass of water, for example, you could try and calm yourself by just focusing on this glass of water for just a couple of minutes, studying it, and as your breathing calms, your whole body will return to baseline levels. And again, distraction techniques to help you to forget about these stressful experiences just for a few minutes can do the world of good to preventing your body from damaging itself even further from the effects of stress.
Absolutely. I think one of the key things that I certainly picked up from this morning's conversation is that we've all got a natural level of immunity, and we've all got a natural sort of, our bodies are fantastic at repairing and healing themselves. However, by being stressed and the physiological responses that come as a result of that, that just gets in the way and stops our body doing what it's designed to do naturally. Yeah. And then that's whenever things start to, sort of, you start to feel the physical actual impact of what is ultimately a physiological response to a stressor that our brains think is a lion at the entrance of the cave. However, it's not. It's actually really relatively insignificant in the grand scheme of things sometimes.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Listen, we're running a little bit out of time, but I'll be cheeky and ask one more question, if that's okay. So, how can one decrease stress created by the problems that will be resolved in an uncertain future? But added into this, it's actually mostly dependent upon others. So I suppose, how can we deal with uncertainty? And sometimes, if it exists or the decision seems to exist with someone else and we're relatively powerless, what can we do?
What my main piece of advice there is to focus on the things in your life that you can control. Because when we have a lack of control in life, that can lead to us feeling helpless and result in feelings of depression. And a lot of us have had a huge lack of control in our lives for at least the past year. So really focus on the things in your life that you can control. And even if these are small things such as your morning routine, at least then you have done something each day that has been completely within your control. So say, for example, your routine is get up, maybe do a small workout, eat something, have a shower. At least that is something that you have achieved each day that you wanted to do. And also, if you add in a little element of something that is, you know, helpful to your health, eating a healthy breakfast, doing a small workout, even a 5-minute workout, a few sit-ups or press-ups, that's something that you've achieved every single day. And that is something that I would suggest to focus on.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. So that was a really, really insightful 30 minutes. Thank you so much for helping us figure out those questions and providing your insights.
And
Just
thank
with
you for
regards
yours.
to no, pleasure. We got there.
Yeah.
In terms of just for everyone watching, Melissa mentioned mindfulness as an exercise. If you're not already aware, we are running daily mindfulness activities and exercises at 12:30, so please look out for those via our YouTube page. However, we are also running mindfulness sessions with Henry on a weekly basis, so Mindful Mondays, 12:30 every Monday, here on our YouTube channel as well. So please do stay tuned for those as well. Really, really worth checking out. Melissa, just before we go, do you want to give a little bit of insight as to what we're going to be doing at 10:30 tomorrow?
Yes, tomorrow we will be doing a workshop looking at wellbeing strategies to boost your moods. So it's called Positive Wellbeing Strategies. And please come along and take part. I'll be presenting alongside my colleague Andrew, and it'll be a good morning. Any questions that you may have, we'll try and answer it then and there as well.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Melissa. Really, really looking forward to that session tomorrow as we head into what will be another action-packed day during Mental Health Awareness Week. To everyone, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We do hope you found that insightful. Thanks for your time and see you again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.